Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to look at a story of how war enters a home, not with some big violent blast, but slowly, kind of creeping in waves, seeping into the lives of one family over the course of 30 years.
And that's really the core question here. This isn't a story about battlefields and politics in the usual sense. It's about history as it's lived inside four walls. Through arguments over breakfast, through a growing sense of fear, and through the slow, subtle shift in what it even means to be a family.
So let's start before the full-scale invasion. We're in a home where you have different generations who are basically living in different versions of the exact same country. This is a place where history isn't something in a book. It's a living, breathing thing right there at the breakfast table. Okay, so let's meet the people at this table, because each one of them is like a different layer of their country's history. First, you've got Helena, the grandmother. Her memory is just steeped in the Soviet world. Her son, Mykola, he's different. He carries that pride of independence from '91. His wife, Oksana, she's the practical one. Their son, Taras, he's already been changed, hardened by what happened in 2014. And then there's Marta, the daughter, who's basically inherited all this tension instead of peace. And this one line, it just captures the tension in the room perfectly. See, Mykola, the father, he just wants to eat his breakfast in peace, turn off the news. But his mother, Helena, she hits him with this dry, sharp wit, reminding him that, hey, history isn't going to pause just because you're comfortable. For her, you have to pay attention. It's not a choice, it's necessity.
And you really see this generational gap when they talk about 1991. For Mykola, independence was this big moment of truth, a time when they could finally stop pretending and just be themselves. But his mother, Helena, she's way more skeptical. To her, it wasn't some neat and tidy solution. It was the start of a whole new set of problems. A contradiction, she calls it, which is actually more useful than a simple, clean answer.
So the family's arguments, all layered with history, they were one thing. But then 2014 happened, and suddenly politics wasn't just some abstract debate over tea anymore. It became immediate, it became dangerous, and it completely changed the emotional weather inside the house. You can really see their family's whole experience shift in these three distinct stages. For years after '91, history was a debate. After 2014, that debate hardened into this constant anxious vigilance. And then by 2022, well, the debate was just over. History became about one thing, and one thing only: survival. And it's the son, Taras, who really puts the shift into words. For him, 2014 just shatters any illusion that their problems are just internal things, like corruption. He suddenly sees an outside force actively trying to tear his country apart. And that changes him. His cynicism turns into a kind of grim readiness. So while Taras is hardening his resolve with words, his mother, Oksana, she responds with actions. She doesn't really get into the political debates. She starts preparing. And this isn't panic buying. It's this quiet, methodical, practical kind of resistance. It's a mother's way of trying to build a little fortress against a future she's afraid is already on its way. So what about those years between 2014 and 2022? Well, they weren't peace, not really. They were this strange, tense time of what you could call uneasy waiting. War was always there, a constant presence, but it was kind of distant, just humming in the background of their daily lives. And during this time, a new kind of language starts to creep into the house. Little phrases like, he went east, or it was shelling, not an accident. They're said quietly, almost like footnotes to a normal conversation. This becomes the grammar of a half-war, where this incredible danger gets normalized into just everyday talk. And Helena, the grandmother, with her long memory, she just nails it. She understands that war doesn't just show up one day. It seeps in. It starts with news reports, funerals for strangers, for names you don't recognize. The real fear, she knows, begins when you start to recognize the names. And then, that one morning in February 2022, the waiting ends. The full-scale invasion begins. But for this family, it's not a shock. It's more like a terrible, dreadful confirmation. It's the moment when all those years of quiet fear and that uneasy waiting suddenly become horrifyingly real. And this brings us to this really crucial idea: rearrangement. The house itself doesn't have to get hit by a missile for everything inside it to be turned upside down. A window isn't for light anymore, now it's a risk. A kitchen cupboard isn't just for food, it's a supply depot. War completely rearranges the meaning of home long before it ever touches the actual bricks and mortar. The family's reaction to that first air raid siren, It isn't dramatic like in the movies. It's clumsy, it's quiet, and it's profound. Oksana says just one word that cuts through everything: shoes. And as they all go down into the basement, they cross this invisible line. The house, their safe place, is now officially inside the war. After that day, the whole idea of the future just shatters. It's not a single path forward anymore. It breaks apart into these conditional, fragile little pieces. If the city holds, if Taurus comes back, life is now lived from one terrifying if to the next. And it's the youngest daughter, Marta, who finally asks the question that's just hanging in the air, the one everyone is thinking. It's a question from a generation that got war instead of peace, and it's this desperate plea to go back to a world that's already gone. Her grandmother, Helena's answer is just one word: no. It's brutal, it's honest, and there is absolutely no false hope in it. That one word completely redefines the family's goal. It's not about recovery anymore, it's about endurance. But Helena then offers a different way of thinking about it. She explains that the real challenge isn't to forget what happened or to get back to normal. The real work is figuring out how to build a new life that's actually livable, but one that still honors the truth of everything they've lost and everything that's happened to them. So, in the end, the house itself has a new job. Its purpose isn't to be a shelter from history anymore. Its purpose is to be a living witness to history, to hold the memories, the fears, and the love of a family that just refuses to go numb.
And that's what the house has become. It's no longer innocent or peaceful or untouched. It's something much deeper and much more difficult. It's a house that is awake. It's awake to memory. It's awake to fear. But it's also awake to love. It has become morally alert.
And their survival, it's not some simple victory. They're not repaired. They're not unchanged. They're certainly not innocent anymore. But they are still here, together, sitting at that same table. And that, right there, is a testament to a really difficult, really profound kind of endurance. And that leaves us with this final question to think about. This story really shows us that the deepest damage of war isn't always the physical destruction you see on the news. It's the slow, quiet rearrangement of everything we think of as normal: our homes, our language, and our love for each other.